Imagine that you are dreaming, and in that dream, you live your entire life. Grow, love, suffer, discover, and then one day he dies. But the next moment he wakes up. What seemed like the end was just the end of a cycle, not of you. What if death is not what we think it is? What if dying is as natural as changing your clothes at the end of the day? After all, you've died before. Or rather, versions of you have disappeared so many times we can barely count. The me you were at 5 years old has died. The self that suffered at 16 has dissolved. The you of yesterday is in a way a ghost. And yet here you are, witnessing it all like a constant, silent, observant presence. So who or what are you, and why do we fear so much the change of dress called death? From an early age, we are conditioned to think of death as the absolute end, a fall into the abyss, a farewell with no return. But this perspective comes from a deep identification with the form, the body, the name, and the story we tell ourselves. What if this is all just a temporary garment, a mask worn by something much larger? Just as the actor changes roles but remains himself, perhaps we are consciousness playing characters. When a character dies, the stage goes dark for a moment, only to light up with a new scene. Life never repeats itself, but it also never erases. She transforms. The river is not the same every moment, and yet it remains a river. You are not the same from one moment to the next, but you continue to call yourself I. There is something, an invisible essence, that cuts through all these changes. And this essence perhaps was never born to be able to die. Perhaps you are simply experiencing the dance of form. Sometimes in this body, sometimes in that thought, sometimes in absolute silence. But why then do we feel so afraid? Because we forgot. We forget that we are the space in which life happens, and not just the events themselves. We forget that the consciousness that looks through our eyes does not just belong to this body, but is the very light of existence. Just as the electricity that lights a lamp does not die when the lamp burns out, the consciousness that animates your body does not end when it ends. She just changes the channel, changes her clothes, changes the frequency. And see, even now you are dying. Every cell in your body is constantly renewing. Every old thought gives way to the new. Each night when you sleep, you die to the world for a few hours, and yet you wake up, not knowing exactly where you came from. What if death is just that, a deeper sleep, a repose of form, a return to the silent depths from which all dreams emerge? The ancients already knew this. Many spiritual teachings said that death is an illusion, not in the sense that the body does not die, but in the sense that who we truly are was never confined to the body. The Egyptians, the Hindus, the Taoists, the shamans, everyone in some way talked about the crossing, not as an end, but as a passage, not as condemnation, but as liberation. But we still cling. We cling to identity like someone grabbing a raft on the high seas without realizing that we are floating on an infinite ocean that has always sustained us. Death doesn't take you, it takes what you believe to be. And that's scary because we invest so much in this story, in this name, in this face, in these social roles. But the truth is that you are the one watching all this go by. And what he observes never dies, he just changes his point of view. Perhaps the question is not what happens after death, but rather who am I who will go through it? If you are consciousness, the creative void, the silent presence that animates the dance of life, then death cannot touch you. What disappears is the shape, the configuration, the vehicle, like a car that parks after a long trip. But the driver can simply get out, look at the horizon, and continue on foot, free from the weight of the machine that he no longer needs. Therefore, there is no reason to fear death. Yes, there is an invitation to live fully, without attachment, without fear, without trying to freeze the moment, an invitation to realize that every end is also a birth in disguise, that each farewell carries with it the promise of a new meeting, and that the cycle of life never ends. It just transforms like water that evaporates, turns into a cloud, and returns as rain. When you understand this, not as an idea but as a living experience, when you feel that life pulses within you but is not yours, that it just flows through this body like the wind through the trees, then death loses its terror. You will realize that you were never truly born, and that therefore you will never truly die either, which has always been the unchanging backdrop against which all scenes appear and disappear. Death, therefore, is not the opposite of life. It is the opposite of birth. Life, this one, is eternal. Life is the field, the ocean, the canvas. It is what allows forms to appear and disappear, and you are life. Not a character, not a story, but the very stage on which everything happens. You are the interval between the notes, the stillness between the words, the space between thoughts. So the next time the fear of death appears, smile at it. Say, "Oh, you again." And remember, the consciousness that is hearing these words now will not disappear. She will just continue her journey, wearing another outfit, dancing another dance, singing another melody. And perhaps somewhere else in the universe a new you will wake up one day, without remembering any of this, and yet with the same spark in your eyes, one that never goes out. Because that spark is who you really are. Not the name, not the body, not the memories it carries. These are passing clouds, and you are heaven, unchanged, vast, silent. There may be storms, strong winds, dark days, but the sky is never contaminated by what passes through it. This is also the case with consciousness. It is not affected by the forms it takes. When the body leaves, when thoughts cease, when emotions calm down, what remains? A silent presence, a knowledge without words, a pure and simple being. And it is in this silence that the answer you are looking for lives. Not in books, not in religions, not in the promises of tomorrow. The truth of death lies in its intimacy with life. Because only those who truly live without resistance, without fear, without defenses, are capable of truly dying. Not as someone who loses something, but as someone who lets go of what was never theirs. Death is the great revealer. It shatters illusions. It shows what remains when everything that was temporary disappears. And what remains is the essence, that which is so familiar that we often forget to notice the pure awareness of being here. You may have changed 1,000 times, but something in you has never changed. This something, or this nothing if you prefer, is what truly is. This is why spiritual masters laugh in the face of death. Not because they deny the pain of leaving, but because they see beyond it. They knew that death is like turning off the lights in the theater just to set the stage for the next play. Nothing is lost, everything is recycled, nothing goes out, everything transforms. If life is a vivid dream, then death is just waking up. Not waking up as someone who ceases to exist, but as someone who realizes that they were always the dreamer, not the dream. That it was always the screen, not the image. And by recognizing this, death loses its weight. It feels light, almost beautiful, like the moment when the sun sets and everything is bathed in golden silence. When you understand that it is not the body, not the mind, not the emotions, but that which witnesses all of this, then you will realize that there is nothing to fear. Because what you are was never born, and what was never born cannot die. You are the eternal now, the space in which everything comes and goes, the void full of possibilities, silence full of music, and in that recognition there is peace. Not a peace that excludes pain, but a peace that embraces everything, a peace that says yes to life as it is, with all its cycles, with all its beginnings and ends. Because you know deep down that the end is just the beginning, dressed in black. That grief is just love without direction. That death is just a change of clothes. And perhaps at the end of it all, we can laugh at our former anguish. Like a child who feared the darkness, not knowing that he himself was the light. And in that laughter, silent, compassionate, ownerless, perhaps we can finally rest. Not at the end, but in the middle of life. Here, now. Because when you realize that you will never really die, you finally start to really live. So stop for a moment. Breathe. Feel the air coming and going like an ancient whisper that life has repeated since time began. Realize that you are not thinking about your breathing. It happens. Just like the sunrise, just like the waves of the sea, just like the beat of your heart. None of this needs your effort. None of this depends on your control. And yet, everything flows. Now imagine that life is this breath, a flow that expands and collapses, a movement that emerges, shines for a while and then dissolves, and death. It's just the collection of the biggest breath. It is the final exhalation of one form, so that another may inhale, an eternal back and forth, an eternal dance. You don't die. You surrender. You return. Not to a place, but to what has always been, like a drop that falls into the ocean and for a moment disappears, only to remember that it was always the sea itself. The drop was not lost. She became everything. At this point you may feel empty, not the void of loss, but the fertile void from which everything is born, an open space without name, without form, without past or future. A silence that is not absence but pure presence, a silence that doesn't need words because it already contains them all. And it is in this silence that the truth rests. You were never a thing. You are the space between things. And then the great cosmic joke reveals itself. You were all the time trying to save yourself, protect yourself, prolong yourself, without realizing that the self you try to preserve is just a fantasy. It's a reflection in the water. Beautiful, yes, but untouchable. And when you let go of this attempt to grab the reflection, you discover that it is the water itself. That's the relief of knowing that there is nothing that needs to be maintained, defended, justified. You can just be. And being is enough. Being is the great blessing. Being is eternity in the form of presence. So when the body is gone, one day don't be sad. It was a good vehicle, a good disguise, a comfortable outfit for a while, but clothes wear out, clothes age. And what joy there is in being able to take them off, stretch your shoulders, take a deep breath and say, it was a good trip. And perhaps in some other corner of infinity you will hear a new melody beginning to play, a new body being woven, a new story about to be born. And before you even remember who you are, you will already be there, living, loving, making mistakes, searching, laughing, crying, repeating the dance. Not because you have to, but because you can, because that's what life does, it dances. And deep within it all, a silence watches, a silence that is you, a silence that neither begins nor ends, a silence that disguises itself as laughter tears sky stone star flower, a silence that knows you will never truly die, because the truth doesn't die. She just changes her clothes. And now here you are listening to all this, with this slight chill in your chest, like someone remembering something long forgotten, like someone waking up from a dream and realizing they never stopped being at home. You are the home, the way, the traveler, emptiness and fullness, the cloth and the embroidery, sound and silence. And if tomorrow is your last day, or the first of a new dance, remember there is no end, just transformation. There is no death, just change clothes. There is no you, and at the same time there is only you in everything. Look around. Everything is you in a new outfit. The flower, the tree, the music, the wind. Nothing was ever separated. There was never really an other. And perhaps this is the final liberation, realizing that what we call death is just another. A part of the great game of being everything and forgetting, so that we can rediscover it and smile again. Now go, not to escape, but to live, not to conquer, but to surrender. Dress well in the clothes you wear today. Dance with her. Be thankful for her, because one day lightly you will leave it hanging and choose another, and he will continue dancing. So look once again at this thing we call life. Notice how it is not linear, it is not straight, it is not logical in the way we expect. It spreads, folds, falls apart, and remakes itself every moment. Just as light passes through a stained glass window and is divided into 1,000 colors, life is expressed in millions of forms, all transitory, all impermanent, all beautiful, precisely for that reason. And death inside that great stained glass window is not darkness. It's just the moment when one color fades so another can shine. Nothing is lost. Nothing is wasted. Everything transforms. But we, conditioned by culture, by the ancestral fear of the unknown, have learned to treat death like a monster. We learn to deny it, to hide it, to push it away. As if by ignoring her, we could escape her touch. We build monuments against its diets, promises of eternal youth life, extending technologies, religions that promise worlds after death, and philosophies that try to dissolve it into abstraction. All of this is born from a single impulse, the fear of disappearing. But stop, silence, listen. Who is afraid? Who inside you fears the end? It's the ego. This construction made of memories, expectations, narratives, and desires. The ego is like a character who fears the end of the story because he believes he is the center of it. He doesn't understand that it's just one line in the book, not the entire book. He doesn't realize that even when the story ends, the book continues to exist. What's more, it continues to be read, reinterpreted, experienced in other ways. And here's the key: you are not the ego. You are that which perceives the ego. You are the consciousness that watches the theater, not the actor on the stage. You are the background against which thoughts arise and disappear. The sky that remains even when the clouds pass. When we look deeply into death, what we find is not an abyss, but a mirror. It shows us how much we identify with what is temporary. She invites us to let go, not as those who lose, but as those who free themselves. Let go of the idea of control. Release the stay requirement. Let go of the need for a happy ending, because life in essence has no ending. It just changes shape. Like the flame of a candle that lights another, the first may even go out, but its light continues, and there is something profoundly beautiful about that. There is a mysterious tenderness in knowing that we don't need to last to be eternal. That eternity is in the moment, fully lived. That when we are fully present, when we surrender to the now without reservation, we touch something that never dies. We touch the source itself. In this state of presence, death stops being a thief. She becomes a master. She teaches us the urgency of love, the preciousness of time, the beauty of what is ephemeral, because everything you love will die. And that's precisely what makes love so real, so intense, so true. Imagine if nothing died. Imagine if everything lasted forever. It would be impossible to understand the value of each gesture, each look, each breath. Death awakens us, not as a threat, but as a reminder. It reminds us that we are alive now, that we have this moment, and just this one. Everything else is memory or projection. The past is an echo, the future a possibility. But the now is where it all really happens. And this now, however fleeting it may seem, is eternal. Because we are never anywhere else but here. We are never in any other time than now. When you see this clearly, something dissolves within you. A weight goes away. Anxiety gives way to presence. Fear gives way to trust, and you begin to live, no longer to avoid death, but to celebrate life. Every gesture becomes sacred, every word a breath of eternity, every encounter a miracle. And in this state, even pain has a different flavor, no longer as something that needs to be avoided, but as something that simply is. Pain is also part of the dance. He also wears the clothes of life, and when you don't resist, when you allow life to run through you with its joys and sadness, with its laughter and mourning, with its beginnings and ends. Then finally you start to move with the music and realize you are not the dancer. You are the dance. Let me continue. And then you realize that everything you ever tried to protect was shadow. The ideas you created about yourself, the images, carefully carved for the world to see, the plans you believed you controlled, all of these are as fragile as leaves in the wind. But there is something that doesn't move, something that doesn't bend over time, a silent presence that was there from the beginning when you still had no words to describe the world, and that will remain when all words are gone. This presence has no name, no face, no history. But it's real, so real that everything else seems like a dream next to her, and the closer you get to that silent core, the clearer it becomes that death is not an event. It's a process, an unveiling, a stripping. It's not something that happens only at the end, but all the time. You die a little every time you abandon a belief, every time you let a love go, every time you change your city, your opinion, your clothes, every time you sleep, every time it goes silent. Death is everywhere. And that's not a curse, it's a gift, because every little death makes room for something new to be born. And in this birth, there is a possibility of being reborn, lighter, truer, more whole. You don't need to carry the old masks. You don't need to carry the weights that once made sense. You can let it all fall. You can go back to being what you were before you knew who you were, and in this return discover something deeper than identity, the essence. And the most curious thing is that the more you accept death, the more alive you become. Because to stop running away from death is to stop running away from life. They are sisters. One completes the other. You cannot choose to live deeply without also being willing to die deeply. Dying to the old man, dying to the known, dying for safety. Life in its purest form requires courage. Courage to throw yourself into the mystery, walking without a map. To love without guarantees, to exist without labels. And death is the greatest ally on this journey. Not as something to be overcome, but as something to be understood. Death cleanses us, frees us. It brings us closer to who we are. Therefore, those who truly live are not afraid of dying, not because they ignore the pain, but because they have learned to dance with it. They look to the end with the same reverence as they look to the beginning. They know that they are both part of the same chain, that birth and death are just the two banks of the same river, and the river is you. Always flowing, always going, always being. And so even if the body one day gives way, even if the names disappear, even if the memories dissolve like fog in the sun, still something remains. A vibration, an impression, a song that continues playing even if the instrument has been muted. Because the music doesn't belong to the instrument. It comes from something bigger, and you are that song. It can be said that each life is a note in an infinite symphony, and when the note stops, the silence is not empty. It's preparation for the next note. And so we continue composing the melody of the universe. Some appear, others leave. Some sleep. Others wake up. But the music never stops. And when you hear that sound that is behind all sounds, something awakens inside you. A memory. A certainty, a peace. Not the peace that comes from the absence of conflict, but the peace that comes from recognizing you were never something separate. It was never an isolated entity fighting the world. It was always the world. It was always the whole. It was always dancing, and if you look closely you will see that everything around you confirms this. Trees that lose their leaves in autumn do not cry for what is gone. They undress with elegance, with silent wisdom, as if they understand that emptiness is not absence, but preparation. And in spring something is reborn, not the same, but something that carries the memory of the previous. 1. An invisible continuity, a dance that does not need witnesses to happen. And so are you. You die a little each cycle, but you are never lost. You transform. Even the pain you feel, this pain that seems so yours, so unique, is just the passage of the old giving way to the new. You feel pain not because something dies, but because something in you resists death. Because something still believes it can control the flow, stop the tide, stop the wind, but you can't. And by understanding this, by letting go of this illusion of control, something is relieved, something expands, life breathes inside you again, and then you start to see yourself in the eyes of others. Realize that there is not an I here and an other there. There are just different expressions of the same source. What dies in one lives in another. What dissolves in one place crystallizes in another. We are all leaves from the same tree, falling at different rhythms, dancing in the wind of the same mystery. And if we are all dancing, then the death of one is not a loss. It's continuation. It's a change of pace. You begin to remember that you were never alone, that every love lived, even if brief, was eternal in the moment it happened, that every goodbye said with the heart was in fact a reunion with what is true, that every grief filled with tenderness turns into compassion. And the greatest wisdom you can have is to accept that everything that begins one day ends, and everything that ends sets the stage for what is to come. In that space of acceptance, something opens, a clarity that needs no explanation, a silent knowledge that does not come from the mind, but from the soul. You feel it without needing to understand. And when you feel it, you understand that death does not need to be understood. It needs to be lived like everything in life. It needs to be crossed with open eyes and a surrendered heart, because it is there in the abyss of the end that you find the eternity of the beginning. And there is a profound beauty in this paradox, because the mind wants to understand, wants to know, wants to guarantee, but the soul just wants to experience. She doesn't need reassurance. You need delivery. And death, with all its cruelty, is the moment when all guarantees disappear. It's when the ego screams, when the story ends, when the body bows. But for the soul it is a return, a dive, a reunion with what was never gone. So when you walk through life with this awareness, everything changes. Little things become big. A hug becomes infinite. A sunset, a miracle. The silence between two words, a portal, because you understand that nothing needs to last to be complete. That completeness is in the entirety of the instant, not in its duration. That eternity hides in the simplest moments. And then you stop running. Stop looking for something. Outside, you sit on your own, not now, in presence. And in this state, even death loses its place as an enemy. She becomes a companion, a shadow that walks beside you, gently reminding you, live now intensely with truth, because the only thing that death cannot touch is what is experienced in totality. What is experienced completely becomes eternal. You begin to dance with her, not out of morbid pleasure, but out of reverence, for knowing that without her life would have no edges. It would be a formless flow, an ocean without waves. Death gives shape to life. It gives contrast, gives intensity. Without her, nothing would be urgent. Nothing would have any flavor. And when one day it approaches, when it comes as it will for everyone, may you receive it with the same dedication with which you received life. May I look into your eyes, not with fear, but with curiosity, like seeing an old friend ready to tell a new story. And in that sacred moment, when the body begins to let go, when the senses slowly turn off like lights at the end of a show, perhaps what you feel is not pain, but lightness. Don't be terror, but silence. A silence that does not suffocate but welcomes. A silence that is not absence but expanded presence, as if all the noise of existence had been just a preparation for this moment. A whisper from the universe saying, come back. You have done a job. Now rest in my arms. There is no rush. There is no judgment. just the sweetness of the return, like the child who played all day and when it gets dark comes home. Tired, yes, but with a full heart. And maybe on your return, you'll realize that you never left home. That everything was an experience, a cosmic joke, a lucid dream experienced with such intensity that for a while you forgot it was a dream. And now when I wake up, there is no sadness. There is gratitude. And the question that may arise at this point is, if it's all a game of forms of comings and goings, of births and deaths, then why does it all matter? Why love? Why suffer? Why fight? Why build? Why cry? Why sing? And the answer is simple. So simple that the mind may not accept it because it is beautiful, because it's dancing, because it's art, because it's life experiencing itself. And life doesn't need justification to be. She is the end in itself. And by living with this awareness, you become part of the poem of the universe itself. You understand that each pain was a brushstroke, that each loss was a musical note, that each encounter was a breath of eternity, and that even the darkest moments were part of a greater symphony. Life is not just made of light. It is made up of the contrast between light and shadow. It is in the alternation between birth and death that the miracle happens. And when you embrace that, when you say yes to everything, even what hurts becomes a blessing. It is possible then to look back, not with regret, but with tenderness, see each mistake as a necessary step, each stumble like a silent lesson, each tear like a sacred river digging deep into your soul. Nothing was in vain, nothing was lost. Everything served the purpose of flourishing. Even when it felt like you were falling apart, life was just making room for something truer to emerge. And even if you don't understand everything, even if there are still unanswered questions, it doesn't matter anymore. Because there is a wisdom that transcends understanding, a peace that does not depend on explanation, a love that does not require reason. This love, which you may have felt when you looked into a stranger's eyes, when you saw the sky on fire at the end of the day, when you held someone's hand in silence. This love is the true answer. He is the one who lives through you. That dies and is reborn with each form, who wears all the clothes, dances all the dances, sings all the songs. And when you realize this life becomes sacred, not because a God ordered it, not because there is an instruction manual, but because everything is an expression of this love that creates and dissolves with equal joy. Life is the temple, now is the altar, and what you are is divinity itself, experiencing its creation. So even if death comes without warning, even if it takes everything you know, it can never touch what you are. Because you are not what happens. You are what remains. You are the look behind the eyes, the space between beats, the pause between words, the silence that listens, the presence that never began and will never end. You will never truly die, because it was never just that way. It was always the bottom. It was always the light. It was always dancing. And now, perhaps with your eyes teary or your chest silently open, you can finally rest in this truth that has always been there, lurking like a friendly presence that was just waiting for you to stop running. Because all the movement in life, all the noise, all the rush, all the fears, were always layers that hid the simplicity of who you are. And what you are, you don't need to prove anything. It doesn't have to last. You don't need to resist. It just needs to be. Be here, be now, be with totality. When the last clothes fall off, when the last breath leaves like an autumn leaf, when your eyes close, not out of tiredness, but out of completeness. May you smile, not with your lips, but with your heart, smiling like someone who knows that everything was a great cosmic spectacle, that every tear, every laugh, every goodbye, and every new beginning were notes of a perfect symphony, and that you, yes you, were the instrument, the musician, and the melody itself. There will be no flashing lights, no judgments, no golden doors. There will only be a return to what never left you, a dive into the silence that sings, a reunion with what has been observing you until now through your own eyes. And at this reunion, you will not be greeted with questions, but with presence. A presence that involves, dissolves, welcomes, without the need for words. And when that happens, when the old clothes are left on the floor of time, you will understand that they have not gone away. He just went home. He just took off what was tight. He only left aside a body that fulfilled its function. Because what you are doesn't need a form to be. You don't need a body to love. It doesn't need time to exist. You are eternity itself, looking in the mirror of now. And when you know this, everything changes. The way you live, the way you look, the way you touch the world. You don't want to run anymore, want to walk. You want to feel. You want to be whole in each moment, because you know that each moment is eternal. You start hearing the music that has always been playing even when you weren't paying attention, and now finally dance with her. No right steps, no script, delivery only. Because the end is just another step, one more gesture, one more note in the infinite concert of existence, and you, oh, you are the sound that continues even when the song seems to have ended. Now that you've come this far, if this reflection touched something inside, you resonated like an old memory or awakened a new perspective on life and death, I invite you to continue this journey with us. Leave your like so that this message reaches more people. Write in the comments what touched you most or what you feel when you think about death. I read everything with care. And if you want more videos like this, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, so you don't miss the next reflections. Remember, you will never truly die. Just go change your clothes. And until then, may you live with truth, with presence, and with the courage to be who you are.